Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you all. So today I will share some thoughts about the work that is ongoing in Peru regarding research on the microbiome, and I will use some slides, but I will mainly draw some ideas on the conversations we've been having with the team. So in Peru, we are working with a team of anthropologists, biologists, and social scientists that has been reaching many institutions and different teams working on the field already to start with. So we've been during this 2021, we've been trying to build links with public institutions that regulate research for human beings, the social science arm of the public institution that actually finance research and plans research within Peru used to be Concitec, now it's called Prociencia. And we are trying to be familiar with the implications of doing research on the microbiome in different dimensions. So for us, it's pretty important to know well and involve indigenous peoples organizations, since we are planning to work in the Amazon basin, and that's where the field of expertise of most of us. And this is a very important step that I don't know if you have or not to take into account for research in Africa, but for us at least, as the organizations of indigenous peoples in the Amazon have been constructing a strong effort to build links with academia, we are trying to build up on that and work with them. So this is a first step that we have been doing organically to make the work flow. And I strongly recommend that you take into account this element, that not necessarily it's evident everywhere, but it's actually very important to make research efforts easier and long-lasting. For example, research on non-contact or in early contact indigenous peoples in the Amazon basin has been actually very much promoted and supported by indigenous organizations in the Amazon. This is a lesson learned that we're trying to take into account. And well, something that we were also developing, particularly with Gabriela Salmon, are the ethical considerations for research in human health. And this is something I'm gonna present now briefly. So in the way we're trying to work, we try to promote ethical research, and the main objective is to respect ethical guidelines. So we are now in the process of doing a review of the international standards that apply for our efforts and their requests, and how to respect scientific integrity and responsibility in the framework of our work. So yeah, this is something that you might already know. Those are the scope of these regulations, and what we are trying to do now, as we have a new panorama in Peru, which actually finance research in social sciences, which is rare and it's new for us, is to try to connect standards that are used already for medical research into the standards that have been prepared, particularly for anthropology, on the social sciences. So this affects mainly research in social sciences and the use of personal records. We are now reviewing the institutional review boards that are going to taking contact with the institutional review boards that are going to affect or be in contact with our work, and that is mainly my institution, the Catholic University of Peru. And for example, there was no experience on this topic, but there is experience on topics that are related to it. And for example, where we have scheduled meetings to discuss on what is relevant, because many of our work will include as well questionnaires, and we'll have personal information involved. So we will touch upon different boards of the same institution. So this is something that you may also encounter, and this is interesting because there's work done by different disciplines. So it's interesting to connect them. I guess you at least Maria Gloria has already experienced that in her work, and many of you. And the informed consent process, it's something that, at least in the context of Peru, is getting more importance, as for example, in the institutional panorama of the country, the law of free and prior informed consent, it's a very important step for the respect of indigenous people's rights that is fairly recent. It was approved in 2011, and it's becoming an institution that has more weight, both politically and socially. So people are more aware and actually familiarized about how to implement it. So we are working on these forms and how to make them work in the context we're working with. So for example, working with organizations that are on the ground, regional indigenous peoples organizations, is a way to implement an informed consent process that is not only ticking the box, but is actually having a multi-level process of consent that is built among different actors to prepare the work on the ground. If we have the chance to work with less contacted people or non-contacted people, this becomes even more relevant because we can't have their direct consent. So working with organizations that have an experience on that and actually talk for and represent indigenous peoples rightfully, it's part of this process. The equitable selection is as well something we are struggling with and spending some time working, since it has to do, our work has to do with remote areas, and having an equitable selection means that we have to as well have secondary data information and select samples that actually represent populations that need the most these findings. So it's a tricky element that deserves good thought. Yeah, so we take the respect for people as one of our main principles, and that's why I'm sharing with you this particular part of the work we're doing, although there's other elements that are taking as well as a lot of time that we are not highlighting now. Yeah, so in Peru, we have to work a lot with the Ministry of Health. I guess you will have the same elements in Africa. Our main concern now regarding this is that the Ministry of Health is overflown with work with COVID. We have been the country with the biggest rate of mortality. So there's a lot of things that are on hold, although they are working, and they're working a lot. They're slow to respond. So this is something that you might encounter as well, and we have to take into account. But there is a lot of relevant precedents in the work that they have done that we're building upon. So the access to genetic resources for us is becoming something important. The community consent is something that I've been discussing through this presentation, that has, for us at least, different levels, and it's engaged with several an ecosystem of institutions that may help us work with this element. And we are thinking about how do we link our research with what we have ongoing in the country related to conservation efforts, and how do they work on the ground. They have been very active, and they have left us with a lot of precedents that are interesting to build upon, regarding as well the community engagement and consent, and how do they work with the resources that they have collected. Yeah, so another
3 minutes left, Deborah.
Yeah, so I'm going to wrap up with the elements I'm not touching at this moment on the presentation. We are now in the process of doing partnership with people that is already working on this sort of research, and that are deploying field work during 2022. This because of the COVID context, and we have to join forces, and because it's pretty challenging to organize fieldwork now, not only because of the real risks that it implies for the work we do, because we are in contact with indigenous peoples, but also because of the changes of the protocols at the national level. So there is a décalage, there is a moment of a lot of restrictions that are not necessarily sound. And that's why we are trying to join forces with other researchers that are doing a similar work. So I recommend you to take this into account. It can be useful for you as well for a practical stand. And also because, as I tried to convey in this presentation, there's ethical issues that join different disciplines. So it's important to share experience on how the work has been done in the territory you are working with, because it might change a lot in each country and in each landscape. So this is a process ongoing. We have a lot of conversations with several actors and learning about it, and I'm very glad we can share this with you, but it's still a work in progress. And please contact me if you have any practical questions, because that's what we are dealing with now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah, for being so flexible and being here with us. We are open to questions, comments. Meanwhile, Deborah, I have one. So in the case of Peru, what do you think are the main obstacles for creating local collections or performing, doing going to the field and getting samples? Are there differences in the human samples from the environmental samples? And what are the major challenges?
Well, the major challenges, I will divide them in two. Some have to do with the context we're living in regarding the COVID-19 crisis. So loads of resources are dedicated to this. We see that in the schedule of our colleagues and our schedules as well. So, and when we contact institutions, there's a lack there. There's that, not that in other contexts was easier to overcome because the institutions were open. We could just drop by and do the work, find a way of making it advance. So now it's way slower on this regard. And in the other side, there's experiences of other researchers doing this kind of work, but this is still groundbreaking work. The protocols are different, and there's a lot of ethical considerations to take into account, and there's experience elsewhere. I mean, in other countries, in other places, but at least for Peru, there's a bit of resistance that we have to overcome by having a lot of dialogues. So this is an element that I may reckon will happen as well in Africa. So we have to take these two elements into account, plan in advance, and take a lot of time to prepare these dialogues. Once people understand the importance of the work, they will let you do that. But working with humans and working with animals in Peru, for example, have different, as well in many places, regulations. And for example, many times it's easier to do more invasive stuff that is less regulated than things that are pretty simple that are super regulated. So you have to take into account the history of how your normative was done, right, and speak
of course it will be very useful, you know, to network and share. You know, there may be similarities with other countries as well, and the Peruvian experience is going to be very useful.